Yesterday, I offered the opening and closing prayers for Chelmsford's September 11th Remembrance Service at the memorial next to the firehouse. Before that service began, I had a chance to chat with the speaker, Russ Blaine, a retired Air Force colonel who had finished his tour of duty at the Pentagon the week before 9/11 happened. He and I discussed our memories of that day and the days after, as well as a shared observation that this year, the anniversary of 9/11 seemed to have fallen out of the national consciousness. The week's headlines have been taken over by stories of domestic forms of violence and terrorism. A political assassination in Utah, a school shooting in Colorado, and the arrest of a 13-year-old in Washington State who was planning a mass shooting of his own. Meanwhile, ICE raids continue at warp speed, and National Guard troops remain deployed in our cities. In our increasingly politically divided country, people are suspicious, mistrustful of the institutions tasked with overseeing our country's well-being, and mistrustful of their neighbors who do not share their same view of the world. 24 years ago is a long time, but for those of us old enough to remember the details of September 11th, 2001, they remain crystal clear, at least in my head. I can recall the clear blue sky, the cool, crisp fall day that was so incongruous with the horrific events that unfolded. The planes, one after another, 4 overall, crashing out of the sky, the smoke, the piles of rubble, the overwhelming destruction, the confusion, and the loss of so many lives. And I remember also the brave souls who ensured that the 4th plane would do the least damage possible, the first responders running into the chaos as everyone else fled, those who guided the wounded and the panicked down the seemingly endless dark staircases, pitch black staircases, or who offered each other companionship in the face of the inevitable. The teachers who comforted their students, shielding them from the worst as they waited for parents to come pick them up or not. The volunteers who went down to New York, to DC, to Pennsylvania, to help, to search, to clean up, to bring water and food and prayers. And the churches and the synagogues and the mosques and the temples who opened their doors, who gathered their people and anyone else who needed a place to pray or sing or light a candle or sit in shocked silence. And I remember the people around the world, like those in Gander, Newfoundland, Canada, who took the Americans stranded so far from home as all the planes had been grounded. It was a terrible, terrible day. Frightening, as it made us see just how vulnerable we could be, how vulnerable we are. And some people reacted to that vulnerability out of a place of fear and hate, burning mosques and beating and even murdering people they believed were Muslim. And I do not underestimate how scary a time it was for our Muslim neighbors or for anyone who looked the least bit Middle Eastern. But I also saw in the initial days that followed let them go by. Most of us responded to this vulnerability by reaching out to one another, sharing in the horror and the grief, but finding unity as well. We gathered. We gathered in our own and each other's religious sanctuaries, in parks and school cafeterias and auditoriums and in the streets. In the face of such violence and vulnerability, we recognize the importance and the power of being good neighbors to each other. I'm going to cry when I say this, but I still remember the signs held up by fans at Fenway. God bless the Yankees. Those signs said something different the week before, and probably did yesterday. But that memory always, for some reason, hits me. Essentially, we experienced on a national scale what Silas House describes in the aftermath of the tornado that hit his hometown. When something terrible happens to people in our communities, whether within our family or our group of friends, our neighborhood, our religious community, our town, our state, our country, even other countries rocked by tragedy, there is an impulse to reach out, to help, that is instinctive. Something deep inside us recognizes that we are all connected, blades of grass in a field, that our survival depends upon us being willing to take care of one another. It's also a way of making meaning, of finding meaning in the face of losses and chaos and forces beyond our control. We can't stop the worst from happening, but we can be present to one another and we can join in the work of healing. I feel grief for my country today, but for very different reasons, as the violence and destruction now wielded are more and more from within. And I fear we may split and splinter apart in unrecoverable ways as we are turned against one another, forgetting what it means to love our neighbors as ourselves, to see no stranger. And I'm not sure how we can find unity when feelings of vulnerability and empathy are dismissed as weak, and when identity becomes ideology. Silas House's letter from home, I think, captures the complexity of living in our times, of loving our childhood home, our neighbors, even if they do not always love us. As he arrives to help his old community recover from the tornado, he observes, "I was overcome with a feeling of being home. I lived this community until my mid-30s, but I left 16 years ago, and I've been homesick ever since. I carry a heartache that is perhaps more accurately called time sickness, a longing for the way things used to be in a place where I grew up. The past is my first home, the period that shaped me into who I am, the span of years where I felt great love and safety." He admits that it was not perfect. He endured much during his childhood and adolescence, a father who suffered from PTSD, an aunt who suffered from depression, and his own suffering as a skinny gay teenager in a community that was not accepting. Noting that 84% of his community voted for the current administration, he reflects, "It is hard for me to rectify this allegiance with people I have known to be so kind, loving, and generous in my home where I should feel safe and welcomed. So even though I love my home place to my bones, I don't always feel like it loves me as a progressive gay man. Somehow, though, and against my will, this makes me love the place even more. The ridges and pastures, the mist rising like ghosts from the caves and crevices, the little creek where we played, runs in my veins as well as through those woods where I grew up, with glowing mosses and blazing ferns. But most of all, the people. In my mind's eye, I see their working hands, the smiles on their faces, stretching out their arms to embrace me without hesitation." Who is our neighbor? It's an ancient question, that we're still struggling to answer, despite having been told by prophets, spiritual teachers, and wisdom traditions for millennia that we belong to each other as expressions of the divine, that we are connected in ways that we do not always see, that our separateness is a delusion and the source of our suffering. Valerie Kaur, a community organizer from California, turned to her Sikh faith in the wake of 9/11 and the anti-Muslim hatred that was turned against her community as well, to establish the Revolutionary Love Project. As a child, she was taught the Sikh Shabad, or prayer, to see no stranger, to recognize that each person she meets is a part of her that she does not yet know. And she breaks down loving your neighbor into some concrete practices, to use wonder and curiosity, to listen to each other's stories, to grieve losses together, to transform anger and rage against injustice and cruelty by reimagining community and institutions and push them towards healing and wholeness. And finally, to remember to love oneself, to know our own boundaries, what we need to do to stay safe, to care for our own souls so we stay grounded and don't burn out. Listening to the speakers at the 9/11 service yesterday and chatting with some of them afterward, I heard their concern, their grief, their despair even, about what is happening to our country on a national level, how the sense of unity in the immediate aftermath of the attack 24 years ago seems not only to have vaporized, but been replaced by something toxic. I heard a lot of Silas House's time sickness as they wondered how and if we could ever recover that sense of unity of being good neighbors. At the same time, I heard the commitment and resolve to stay engaged, at least here, on a local level, to serve their community, to reach out where they could. Like Silas House, like Valerie Kaur, I trust that healing whatever is broken in our country, our communities, lies and begins in our capacity to see the humanity of others, to be good neighbors, to invite them to belong to us, even if and when they tell us we don't belong to them. In fact, we have to insist on it. Insist that they belong to us, and insist that we belong to also as we are. Insist on our shared humanity. I know. That kind of spiritual work is so, so hard, and I am sorry. But we are not the only faith that teaches to love our neighbors. We are not the only ones. But at the same time, that is who we say we are as Unitarian Universalists. So we have to put our faith in that boat.